Aloha, everyone. My name is Britt Horn. I am an AST in the Sensory Skills module with the Specialty Coffee Association. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Zoe Thorson. Would you like to introduce yourself, Zoe?
Hi, I'm Zoe Thorson. I am an ASD as well, but in barista and brewing, and I am currently a Q assistant instructor through CQI.
And today we wanted to hop on, me as specifically an AST in the Sensory Skills program, and then Zoe specifically with her CQI instructors pathway. We wanted to kind of just have a conversation, answer each other's questions, answer questions that other people in the community might have around this transition with the Specialty Coffee Association taking over the Coffee Quality Institute's Q evaluation course and exams and pivoting from the 2004 legacy form to the coffee value assessment system. It's a mouthful.
Right.
I think what I kind of want to start with is just a brief overview of what the coffee value assessment system is, where it came from, um, when it was introduced, and why it's here now, where it's going. So I became aware of the coffee value assessment system in 2022 when the beta version was kind of circulating within the Specialty Coffee Association, like AST Circle. And it's basically 4 different forms, and each one of these forms has its own objective and a very specific use. So the first one is that we're talking about is the descriptive form, which uses a check all that apply test. And as you're assessing the coffee and looking at different attributes, you're checking different descriptors that apply to that specific attribute. Then there's the affective form. The affective form is using a hedonic scale from 1 to 9, basically being extremely dislike or extremely like different attributes in a coffee. Where the assessor gets to basically share what their preference is as they're observing this coffee, assessing the coffee. And then you have the extrinsic form is looking at the characteristics in the coffee that are not inherent to the cup. So it's not a sensory assessment, it's just looking at maybe certifications around the environmental or social practices that were used to produce the coffee, the origin, the processing method, the variety, again, extrinsic characteristics of the coffee. And then finally, the fourth form is the physical assessment of the coffee. So where the former specialty coffee standard put a lot of weight on the green grading of the coffee. This isn't putting as much weight on the green grading, but still taking the opportunity to observe the physical coffee.
It is still
Okay,
being assessed in the same way, though. So it is,
yeah.
that's the one part of that is just like almost the same. Like green grading in a Q process and green grading in the CVA process are the same scenario.
Yeah, the forms do look almost identical. But I'm curious, I mean, with the definition of specialty coffee evolving, there isn't the same like where before it was 0 category 1 defects and
Mhm.
5 category 2 defects. That's not part
There's
of the
no longer a
definition.
hard line of, oh, if there, yeah, as you said, if there is one full sour bean, then the coffee is no longer a specialty in the updated or the CVA form. That is no
Oh,
longer the case.
why do you think changing the definition of specialty coffee um, was a decision that was made at this point?
Oh my goodness, there's a lot of reasons. As someone who very actively used the SCA cupping form frequently in multiple different jobs and in different ways throughout time, and as someone who taught courses surrounding the use of it, it always was somewhat flawed. Like 20 years ago, it was such a step up from having nothing. But there was like, for instance, yeah, um, no metric on sweetness. And then the big gap, there's like the fact that it's the it's really relying also on preference. Like it doesn't speak to different standards that of preference in different places in the world. For instance, I work for an importer. We'll Q score a coffee or use the 2004 SCA form, and it will sometimes be like an 83 point coffee, but it will taste like blueberry jam and boozy, and like someone put some whiskey in there. It'll be really wild and really interesting. And we know a customer for that coffee, but it's not considered high quality coffee based on the old form because it was very limited. Um, and it didn't really give space for more unique process coffee to give. It kept us all like the same attributes were at the same level of value, regardless of where the coffee's home, like where the buyer or the seller was.
Mhm.
And we needed to broaden what specialty is because there wasn't, it really, and it also made it so that if a coffee was 80 points and like, or 79.5 points, it was no longer considered specialty and would get a much lower price because it didn't make
Right.
it that half a point higher in a very like a mildly subjective system.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the thing that I've also been using the SCA cupping form, the 2004 form for many years. And as an AST instructor, I think that was one of the things that was um, incongruent, basically. It's a word that we like to use in the sensory world.
Hmm.
So basically, we're teaching learners about all these different types of sensory tests, difference tests, affective tests, analytical versus um, non-analytical tests or preference tests. So we're teaching about all these different test styles and what they're used for, what the panel should look like, how many people on the panel, how to determine error, and one of the things that we're teaching in this sensory skills program for the last several years is that you don't mix tests. And I think that that
Hmm.
was one of the things that was really interesting to me about teaching this sensory skills program was like, here's all this theory around sensory science, but we're going to
Hmm.
give you a tool to use in the sensory evaluation of coffee that doesn't actually meet those standards of like
Yeah.
standard um, sensory science theory and application. And so that was, and the thing that I think what it really came down to, sensory science doesn't care about quality. Like it just doesn't, because quality
Hmm.
is totally subjective and quality is totally up to the person that is experiencing or has a preference around something. And that's not to say that like the opinion of Q graders or coffee professionals, professional tasters isn't of value. It's just the amount of weight that we put, like how much value we were placing on people's preferences about a product. Because exactly what you said was like if this coffee is just like right on the edge of what we define as specialty, under the standard of quality, under our standard of quality, the SCA, like our universal understanding of what quality should be in the coffee industry, and it's just right on the edge, that has such a huge impact on the sustainability of the farmer, right? Like on what they're
Hmm.
able to take away, what the value is of their product. And so I think in 2022 and then 2023, really when like the coffee value assessment system was like in front of me, and I had to change all of the curriculum for the specialty for the sensory skills program, and was really spending a lot more time with these forms, and really like learning more about how we assign value to a coffee, or how we have previously been assigning value to a coffee versus like kind of the direction that we could be going. It really I think really opens up the
Hmm.
door for value to exist way outside of just like the quality
Oh,
of something,
absolutely.
right? And I have a
Yeah.
big appreciation, and you've spent a lot of time here in Hawaii too, like we're our industry out here is so unique because we we have plenty of coffees here that are scoring subspecialty, plenty of coffees here that are scoring just on the cusp of specialty, and these coffees are fetching 25 to $50 a pound.
Hmm.
Why? Because cost of production is valued here, and because the grower knows what the cost of their production is, and the grower knows what the consumer is willing to pay, and so they have that power outside of what their coffee score is, what the C market is declaring the price to be, and
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's high tide, high time, whatever. I think it's time that like we look at a new assessment, a new system for
Absolutely.
valuing coffee. This is my
Yeah.
opinion.
Especially, no, especially thinking about Hawaii or like 2 weeks ago, I had to cut and using the SCA form, the 2004 form, I think it was like 40 Mexican coffees, all wash process, um, like maybe up to like three different varieties. And it's so, it's like, oh, they're all 82 through 84 points. Like it's so hard. And it's like, oh, why, as an importer, why are we going to choose this one over like a half a point or a point? And like it's
Mhm.
such a small window. And that's one thing I do love about the CVA form is also how much broader, how much more room there is. Um, and my original concern, which or my big concern, well, there's a few concerns I have, but and just practical application in my day-to-day life,
Yeah.
how is the CVA form going to be utilized in a scenario like an importer or for purchasing and upholding green contracts? That was my immediate reaction in
Mhm.
2022. I'm like, I have four forms. I cup something like 20 to 100 coffees in a day. So 80 to 400 forms filled out in a day seemed really insane. And I was very reluctant in the beginning, although I really appreciated the fact that it was more driven in sensory science and made this broader window. And what I've come to the conclusion, especially after talking to a lot of industry folks, is we all sort of utilize the things in the ways we need anyhow.
Mhm.
Like when I go back to when I was talking about that really boozy, weird coffee that wouldn't score that high, but like has a buyer and costs a bit high, costs more than that points that it had. Um, well, we still were able to set up contracts for this weird coffee using for a high dollar amount using the form because we relay more information to the buyers than just that 83 points.
Right.
And just like, when we're thinking about like, how are we going to use it to uphold contracts? It's like, oh, I don't need to use all four of these forms to uphold contracts. Honestly, I could just use one of them. And as long as I'm the same cupper or like the same group of cuppers, and I could just do that for every coffee to make sure it's the same coffee. In fact, it's probably more accurate
Mhm.
as the one we contracted. So I just want to bring that up because I felt really overwhelmed about the amount of forms
Mhm.
originally and like how to utilize them in a way to sort of, keep in the way they're intended, which is to like show a bigger viewpoint of value in a coffee, but also be able to not be efficient in the work I'm doing and to value time and on all parties that are involved in assessing coffee. So anyway, sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent.
No, it was great. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're just kind of tangenting anyways, and kind of like, I think just trying to make sense of what's going on and how we're
Mhm.
going to move through this shift. And I think, um, what the point is of this conversation, I think for you and I was like we want to figure out how to support the direction that the industry support folks like wherever they're at. Like whether they're ready to move in the direction of like, all right, I want to learn about the coffee value assessment system. I want to keep my Q grader license into 2026.
Yeah.
Like I'm willing to evolve with, the strong arm of the Specialty Coffee Association. Okay, great. Like if you're ready to do that, like we want to find a way to we want to
Hmm.
support that journey, but we also want to meet people where they're at and recognize what's been frustrating about this and just like kind of like hold space for a conversation around it because I've had a lot of conversations
Yeah.
with different people. So I think we wanted to kind of talk through some of this, define some things, name some timelines and like ways that
Hmm.
we can support um, over the next, 6 months. But no, I think
Yeah.
that was really I think it was really helpful to kind of to talk about the practical application of it. Because I think a lot of
Yeah.
people, that's something I've heard is like a lot of people are like, well,
And
4 forms, like, you
we
know,
also already have like well, I guess I'll say it for this group. I'm like an instructor's big group chat. There's already like forms being passed around, and it's like, okay, this is the quick format to do your job. So, and we do that, we did this before. Like I worked at a different and we had a scoring form that was sort of like the 2004 form, but we like there was lesser categories to make it easier. And
mhm.
it just like they scored sweetness on a 6 to 10 scale as well. So like everyone's already like made hybrid forms. This just gives
Absolutely.
us a larger data set to do that. And there's already easy use forms going around to
Right,
make this efficient depending on what your needs are. And
right, right. Yeah, I think that that's such a good point. I mean, when the an importer that we've worked with for many years, like they have their own, they've said the same thing. Like we cup like in some cases like hundreds of coffees a day. Like
Mhm.
the 2004 specialty coffee form SCA form is not suitable for like our decision making needs and
Yep.
we don't need a score and even like when we buy coffee from them like we don't buy coffee based off of a score like there's we can
Mhm.
ask them like what they might have a score for the coffee they might have have done that style of or used the SCA form
Mhm.
and but most of the time it's just based off of descriptions and for us like in our company like it's based on like we make our purchasing decisions primarily based on social and environmental um,
Yeah.
certifications. And then like secondly, we look at the descriptors. Kind of like we kind of
We
we'll put
do.
weight equal weight on both.
So that's amazing. It is going to be interesting, I think, industry-wide, because working for an importer, the majority of our customers have a point threshold. Like, so they're like, we only buy 83 point coffees
Mhm.
through 85 point. So it's like a common, very common conversation that we have with our clients and customers. And so I am curious, like how I look forward to seeing the next 5 years, how like the transition will go. Um, I also think it's good we're having this call because there is a lot of urgency surrounding understanding the CVA form and actions one needs to take if they're a Q grader or have taken the Q before. Um, but I also think 2004 form, it's going to take 5 years for it to
Oh yeah.
like become like the way coffee isn't, or to no longer be the way coffee is traded.
Mhm.
Because it's just going to take a long time for the industry to adjust to a very different system. It's hard for me internally, and I like the CVA form from 2022. I was on the standards development panel with the SEA and excited about this form, but then I was like, but what we're doing with the queue is sort of working. I loved going down to Peru, and although the form doesn't make perfect sense, I could cup with someone I didn't cup with ever before, and we would be like calibrated within a point miraculously. Although we ate different foods, so like something was working there, and I'm a little sad to see it go
Mhm.
being calibrated.
Yes.
What was interesting when I did my last community of practice, an event where Q instructors and assistant instructors come together once a year to calibrate, I was in Thailand. And so the interesting thing was everyone that was from Thailand or around Thailand could not taste ferment. And they were, because there was a strong cultural preference there for ferment.
Hmm.
And it was so like black and white. And I had a similar issue one time when I was teaching in Puerto Rico with bitter. There was like a strong bitter preference there. And so they just were their threshold was so different. And
Mhm.
so that is one thing that's really good about the new CVA form versus the old one is that the quality can speak more to a standard where a market or the tasters are more ferment focused or more bitter
Mhm.
focused.
Right.
So it was biased probably to more of to certain markets. We were calibrating to certain markets, but that doesn't mean it's all markets. If you have any retakes to be done, or you want to take the original Q course, you have until the end of September to do that. After September 30th, CQI will no longer have any quality evaluations courses. So any retake has to be done and passed before then. And the good news is some people are doing retake only courses, such as PCR and me. And so that's, I think, the most important timeline of all, because if you don't finish whatever you need to do by that date, then the progress and the investment on like fine tuning your sensory skills won't be lost. You'll still be a great taster. But if you want to keep your certification, you need to do that. Then the next timeline that's really important is that anyone who wants to keep their Q certification and turn it into an evolved Q certification, or even if you ever had a Q certification, you forgot to calibrate, you're in this category too. What you have to do is take a CVA course by the end of the year. Those will be offered at PCR as well, and they are an in-person 2-day course, but that needs to be done by the end of the year. And not only do you have to take this course, you have to go on the SCA website and put in to get your certifications transferred to have the new evolved Q grader certification. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that was pretty
We skipped the ASTs, the
well.
sensory
We
skills
can,
folks.
yeah, but we
Great
can,
news. If
that's,
you're a sensory
yeah,
skills AST, you take the CVA course, you are now a evolved Q instructor. So starting Britt, starting in after September, um, will be able, if she chooses, to teach the new evolved Q course, which is also going to be a 5-day course, similar to the CQI quality evaluation course. It will consist of similar things, just based more on the CVA form, or based absolutely on the CVA form.
yeah. And then if you're a sensory skills professional level student, can you,
Mhm.
if you've already completed like foundation, intermediate, and professional level, or at least the intermediate professional level, pass both of the written and practical exams for those two courses through the Specialty Coffee Association, you're considered a professional level student. Are those students are also qualified now if they take the CVA course, the 2-day course, to have a Q grader license going into 2026?
Yes,
Okay. So those two
yes.
dates are really important.
And
So September 30th. Oh, go ahead. No, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
oh, and I just want to harp. So I'm saying this like I'm honing in on September 30th, end of CQI courses, and December 31st deadline to take the CVA course. But I can't stress enough that you have to go on the SCA's website to submit and apply for these sort of things to get your certifications transferred, to get into their new systems surrounding the Evolved Q, because these deadlines aren't just to take these courses, but also to get all of your paperwork in with them as well. And if you want to be an instructor, you also have to put that request in soon, because there is online, even if you meet all the qualifications, you still have to do online onboarding to teach the course.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really helpful. So basically, like, don't wait until the last minute to do all of this stuff.
Hmm.
Um, let's say that PCR was to offer a bundle of like the intermediate and professional sensory skills course in August.
Hmm.
Why would someone choose to do that course instead of taking the Q combo course?
Um, Why would you choose that? Well, you're the instructor for sensory skills, Britt.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm just curious, like I have an idea of like why someone would choose that, but I'm just curious, like if you have any opinion,
Well,
because you're a
the
CQI
CVA course,
instructor.
yeah, the CVA course does not qualify you to be an evolved Q grader unless you already were a Q grader.
Right.
So if you aren't a Q grader, your best move is to go down the sensory skills pathway. And also sensory skills is going to be more geared towards the new Q program that the SCA will be offering after September 30th, anyhow. Um, so those skills and those things that you'll learn in there will be more helpful and geared towards that form and like towards the future of grading coffee and
Mhm.
assessing it. Do you probably do you have things to add maybe also
No, I
though?
actually think that was yeah, I was just kind of curious because from
If
my
you're not a Q
perspective,
grader, definitely it's a good idea.
yeah, to take it. So if you're not a Q grader, but if you are not a Q grader and you're already signed up for a Q course, like you still are on the path to getting your Q so long as you take so long either one of these pathways, whether you take the Q combo course before
Hmm.
and pass everything before September 30th, or you take the I mean, honestly, I guess you could take the sensory skills anytime between now and December,
Yeah.
really. And as long as
Yeah.
the same thing, you take the intermediate professional, pass both of those, and complete
Hmm.
your coffee value assessment, then you get a Q. So there's still options for both of these different
Yeah.
programs to get you to the goal of having a Q by the end of 2025.
Yeah. It's also good because to be frank, the SCA, the new evolved Q course, has not been finished being developed. They feel very confident, the SCA, that will get finished by October, but it's an expansive program and a big change. This whole thing is a giant change.
Hmm.
So since it hasn't finished being, developed yet, the sensory skills program is probably the best avenue to sort of get up to date with that, especially um, if you haven't already been in the Q program.
Hmm. Yeah, one of in the foundation level course of the sensory skills program, we, I mean, a lot of it's just kind of like a survey of sensory science, but we do introduce the
Hmm.
affective and descriptive forms. And then in the intermediate, we go way deeper into those two forms, and then introduce the physical and extrinsic. So just to give an idea, like those, and then of course, like the professional level course goes way deeper in how to use data from those forms and interpret information. Um,
Hmm.
but that's just kind of a quick overview of what the sensory skills program looks like. And my
Yeah.
understanding is when the Specialty Coffee Association, um, or when the new EQ course
Hmm.
is rolled out, combo course and tests, I assume that they're going to do a similar thing to like a sub. I'm curious, like, let me rephrase this question. What's the difference? Do you know anything about what the difference is going to be between the sensory skills program and the
Well,
new Q course?
I don't know in that I am not a part of developing the new Q course. I
Hmm.
do know what was relayed to me during Expo this year by the education team and um, I don't know, I'm calling them the science team. Somebody can have my head for that later at the SCA, which is that the sensory skills program is going to evolve as well and be less geared towards using this CVA form and more about how we do sensory science in general in a broader
Hmm.
sense, more, still tons of activities, but it's not going to be as geared towards the CVA form. And then the new EQ program will be geared almost completely towards the CVA form, very similar to the way the old quality evaluation program at CQI was totally geared towards using the SCA 2004 form. So right now, if you take sensory skills, you're sort of like a leg up towards the, towards the future of the, Q grader program.
Yeah, you get a little of everything right now.
Hmm. Maybe you could clarify too. I think one of the benefits of the sensory skills program for especially a coffee professional is that it does have a broader viewpoint on how we analyze coffee and like what sort of data we need for what purpose, as opposed to being like the old Q program, which yes, I fine-tuned my sensory skills in that program, but it was geared towards one method. And then I had to just navigate on my
Mm,
own. Like, how do I set up something else
mm,
to figure out what's the best roast profile for coffee? How do I
sure,
can't use the 2004 form for that, but sensory
sure.
skills sort of sets you up to use those skills to set up the program that you need
Mm-hmm.
for
What
your,
test will work, what your
yep.
panels look like. Yeah, I mean, I love the sensory skills program. It's like been my um it has been like the passion of my experience in my professional career in the coffee world, has been around like, aside from like running a business and all of the nitty-gritty stuff with that, which I can't say is always really fun, but like the sensory skills part of my job has always been really fun, and what I get to teach and then how I get to like use that information and practice it. But like even stuff about like knowing how to set up a triangulation. Like it sounds so easy to set up a triangulation, and it is relatively easy to
Mhm.
set up a triangulation, but there are very specific metrics around how to set up a triangulation correctly. And those
Mhm.
are the kind of details that we go so that the information that you're collecting from that triangulation is um, is accurate and usable and is actually giving you statistics on, how like how many people can actually tell the difference between
Yeah.
these two products. And then I think about like if you're trying to do product matching, like you're trying to match a
Mhm.
flavor profile, like what test are you going to choose to use? Um, and
But the
it can be
biggest
very,
one is,
yeah.
mhm. Oh, as a roaster, I think about with triangulations when you're switching out coffees in a blend. It's like the
Hmm.
number one, like that's the way to do it.
Hmm. In light of these important dates, all these changes that are incoming. Zoe will be back on island permanently in August, and we are going to be rolling out here at PCR in our lab that looks over the ocean. We will be rolling out a series between Zoe, myself, and another PCR AST named Eric Musel, who is also a sensory skills AST here at PCR. We will be teaching the coffee value assessment system 2-day course.
Hmm.
Zoe will be offering Q retakes,
Yep.
and we will also be offering several intermediate professional sensory skills combo courses. So if you are interested, if you fall into any of those categories we were talking about earlier, folks who are lapsed Q graders, folks who are
Mhm.
current Q graders, folks who want to get their Q this year, folks who are ASTs, sensory skills ASTs, or are sensory skills coffee professionals. Um, we have programs in place to get you
Mhm.
to your goals.
We will be offering retakes, retake only days for Q, sensory skills bundles, as well as a CVA 2-day course. Um, I also just wanted to make it very clear because I know this all happens so fast and it's sort of you're searching the web, you get it's just a lot, and there's a lot of noise around it out there. The CVA form is going to be the thing. This is the timeline. I'm usually I'm a skeptical individual, but in this case, like this has been the plan. for the last 2 years for the CVA to become the primary form in the coffee industry. So even if you don't fall in any of the categories with the timeline, learning more about the CVA form by taking one of the sensory skills courses or the CVA course is really valuable because it is going to be the future language and evaluation standard in the coffee industry. Seeing a lot out there that people are like, but are they really going to? And I'm like, no, this, this is
They're
happening.
serious. They're serious. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can talk about, I think another time we can talk about how frustrating the rollout was and
Yeah, I could rant for like
um
a good hour.
yeah, I think a lot of people could, but
That's
I
a
think
different,
that's
yeah.
yeah, I think what we're trying to present here is some level of optimism and support
Hmm.
for the direction that the industry is going.
Yep.
So that we can yeah so that we can support individuals who want to move in that direction
Hmm.
and just like be a space where you know we're available to, I'm just gonna say it again, the word support. I'm just ranting now,
Nope,
rambling.
that was great. Oh, absolutely. Like that's the primary reason for I think this call and why there's so many of these courses on the calendar for PCR is because it was my personal goal, even before setting up some of these courses with Britt, to try to support anyone who needed support in the CVA course or Q retakes because it's a fast timeline and it's hard to access these
Mhm.
courses.
Yeah, it
So
is.
I'm really glad, that we're all on the same page and PCR and I are like very wanting to support and help the community in this transition in whatever way is needed.
Yeah, we're excited to have you back here.
Yeah, me too.
Check the calendar, either the SCA calendar or and PCR's calendar for August and September, primarily when we're going to be rolling out a lot of these courses. And then in
Hmm.
the meantime, we'll still have a couple of sensory skills programs in the works. We'd love to see you and welcome you to Hawaii Island to take the Coffee Value Assessment course and the sensory skills programs. We have a very peaceful lab that overlooks uh, the Pacific Ocean on a coffee farm. It's a pretty special place, and it's a great place to take your sensory courses.